Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. When I reviewed The Graveyard Book, which is one of my favorite books, I really love it, someone commented, Lindsay Bolton commented that The Ocean at the End of the Lane is one of her favorite books. And this is a title that I have heard of as long as I've known of Neil Gaiman, but I am, like I've said before about his books, some of them I really love, some of them I really don't. So I hadn't got around to trying this one, but I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you for that recommendation. Um, this is one of those books that I feel like falls more into the genre of the Graveyard Book, where it's not really it doesn't really feel like a children's book, it doesn't really feel like an adult book. And I wish, or like written specifically for either of those. And I wish he would write like this more often. I wish he would write all of his books like that. The Graveyard Book is like that, where it feels like ageless and timeless. That it's not confined to children or adults. I will say about The Ocean at the End of the Lane, it's sort of fantasy, but I would describe it more as a fairy tale type genre than fantasy. I will say I do not think young children should read it. There's a couple things, a couple moments that are kind of, that maybe young children should not be reading. But older kids, adults, I think it's really, really good. Love the writing when he writes like this, in this almost like fairy tale style. Just the language that he uses to talk about magic, to talk about books, is so much fun. It's just there's a richness to reading it that his more adult books definitely don't have. And again, I feel like this is where his heart is in this kind of books. And he even has a quote in this book that I felt like was really coming from him rather than his character, because while it's a fairy tale dealing with magic and adventure and a lot of danger, it's also a celebration of literature, because the little boy in the story loves reading, loves characters from literature. He talks about books being where he has learned most of what he knows about the world, and I really feel like I can relate to that. But he has this quote in the book about myths, which again I think is coming straight from Neil Gaiman himself, because he wrote the book of a book on Norse mythology, and just the kind of things that he likes to write about. You can tell he's a big fan of myths and myth systems. But he says this about myths. I liked myths. They weren't adult stories and they weren't children's stories. They were better than that. They just were. And I wish that more books were like that. I think he does as well. And that is what The Ocean at the End of the Lane is like. That's what The Graveyard Book is like. It's not really adult or children. It just is a story, and I love that. All that being said, I didn't like it as much as The Graveyard Book, but they're very different. Totally different feels to them, even though they have some things in common as far as genre. But I just really enjoyed it. It was gripping. It was exciting. My favorite thing about it was, really just the writing, the way that he talked about magic. He's really good at hinting at these vast other worlds without having to get too descriptive, because he's writing just a short little book. So he's not like, he's not like creating a whole other world that he has to do a lot of world building for. It's just these glimpses into these fantasy worlds that are very exciting and make you want more. And I really like that. A couple things about the book that I maybe didn't love. It was hard for me to accept, and he did a lot of things to try to make it more believable. it was hard for me to accept that the main character of the story is only 7. 7 is just so young. And there are a lot of moments where he is very childlike. He has a lot of moments where it's really supposed to like come home to you that this is just a very little boy who doesn't understand what's going on. And it is from the perspective of, the book starts with the boy who I believe never has a name. He starts with him as an adult, like an older man, going back to the ocean at the end of the lane and remembering these adventures from his childhood with the Hempstock women from the Hempstock farm. And but 7 is so young. Imagining a 7-year-old going through these things, making the decisions that he makes, doing the things that he does. It was a little bit of a stretch. I mean, 7-year-olds can do a lot more than people will give them credit for a lot of the time. I will say that, but I don't know. I felt like it was a stretch for me, even though he did try multiple times to put things in there. I feel like to make it more believable. I was still like, I feel like this is more like 10-year-old maybe. So yeah, how young the boy was, even though I did enjoy a story that was this good and this good like for adults to enjoy from that young of a perspective. I feel like that's kind of a unique thing to do in a book. But again, just a little bit hard for me to accept. And the other thing was I really, really loved like the first half of the book. Really exciting, really gripping. By the time the second half came around, though, I was kind of like, this is a small book. It's short. You can get through it really quick. People on the back were saying that they like read it in one sitting. For such a short book, I felt like it had a lot of climaxes. And that happens, you see that happen a lot in like longer fantasies where there's like multiple big battles at the end or multiple showdowns where you feel like there's this giant climax and then a little bit later there's another giant climax before the last enormous climax. And for such a short book, I felt like it had too many of those scenes. They would come up against the huge evil thing that they're dealing with and kind of overcome it for the moment. And then a while later, they have to have another scene like that. And then another scene like that. And I just felt that it was a bit much. By the end, it was kind of like, okay, we've been through, again, in such a short story where there's multiple scenes where the boy, is in a terribly dangerous situation, really thinks he's going to die, all the emotions of that, all the tension of that, multiple times in such a short story, I felt like was too much. A little too much. I still really liked it. I still thought it was really well done. But yeah, I think just a couple too many like showdown type scenes for me. But yeah, I thought, again, the magic is in this other world is not spelled out, but I think it's done really well. I really liked it. Really liked the characters. He does a good job of like genuinely scary and disturbing moments too, because it's like a fairy tale, but it's not, and it's fairly innocent, you could say, but there's definitely some things in there that are like, oh, this is not that innocent. This is actually pretty dark. I don't want to spoil anything, but the scene where Ursula Monkton shows up, I just immediately felt dread. It was like, okay, this is really bad and this is really scary, and the next few chapters are probably not going to be any fun. So that was good. And then there's a particular scene, if you've read the book, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about when you do read the book. If you haven't, then you won't definitely know what I'm talking about then. The scene with his father was really disturbing. I was like, oh no, what's going on? So yeah, and a couple of other things with father. Yeah, I would not recommend this book for young children, but did a really good job being like disturbing and I don't know, gets your heart rate up, gets your emotions going again in such a short story is impressive. So yeah, really just a celebration of writing, a celebration of stories, storytelling, ancient stories. I am not going to get into it because I think people get into this stuff way too much, but I was definitely picking up on some possible allegories within the story, some metaphors for other things that I felt like, because I don't usually get into that because I feel like people assign metaphors to things way too much and look at books and be like, oh, they give their opinions of what a book was trying to say as fact. I have some opinions about what I think this book might be saying, but I'm gonna keep them to myself. But that added another layer to it of being like, oh, I think he's drawing some comparisons to other stories here with his characters and a lot of the plot points, which I enjoyed. Because here's the thing about metaphors, here's the thing about analogies and stuff. If you're going to use them in a book, that's great, that's fine. That adds another adds depth, adds another layer to your story, but that top layer still needs to be good. That's why a book is without excuse if it's terrible, just because you didn't get the metaphor. That top layer, that story on the surface, still needs to be good, still needs to be enjoyable, still needs to be accessible for those who don't understand the metaphor beyond it, because the metaphor beyond it should add depth and meaning and an extra enjoyment for those that understand it. But for those who don't, that book still needs to be good. The story that is just the surface level story still needs to be well done. I feel very passionately about that because I hate it when people will say, oh, you didn't like this book because you didn't understand what it really meant underneath. And it's like, no, even if you don't understand what it really meant underneath, the story that it's telling on the surface still needs to be good. So that's how I feel about that. But yeah, this was a really enjoyable read. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend it for any fantasy lover or just like fairy tale lover. Yeah, again, I wish Neil Gaiman would write all of his books in this kind of in-between genre because it's really, really special. So anyway, those are my thoughts on The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Definitely give it a read and let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.